So after working with the CSS, we now have a nice looking site. Now it's time to move on to add some nice interactivity by using some JavaScript plugins provided by Bootstrap. And we're going to start with this image that we have in the header section. The thing we could do is to change that into a nice slideshow. And this is basically what we're aiming for. So here we have a nice slideshow, and this is changing to another image every 2 or 3 seconds. And we're going to go to our code editor, and we're going to work with the template bootstrap-templates.html. This is the same template that we used in the previous section for the first part of the project development. So let's continue with the same document. Also, for this entire section, we'll have the opportunity to use another file, which is the code snippet. And you have the same file twice with 2 different extensions, so use the one which is good for your code editor. And what we're going to do is to conveniently go back and forth between this document and our templates in order to copy the code that we need in order to create our plugin. So this one is the markup for the carousel, and I also put some indication directly on the template, so slideshow goes here, so you're going to place this markup below the image element. So before going any further, we're going to have a look at the Bootstrap documentation on the JavaScript page, and from there you're going to go to the carousel section. So here we have the example of the carousel.js. For our demonstration, we're going to use the first example. So whenever we click on this slide, we're going to move to the next slide, although there's going to be a slight variations to our final design. And below you have the corresponding markup. And we're going to go further down below example to the subcategory usage, where we're going to see how we can incorporate this plugin by using JavaScript. And that is pretty straightforward, because in order to call the function carousel, we just need this line of code. So back to our code editor, we're going to go to the file with the code snippet, and we're going to start by copying this HTML markup. So that goes all the way down to line 134. And then we're going to go back to our template bootstrap-html, and where you see slideshow goes here, this is where you're going to paste this entire markup. Also, this image that we've had all along, we're going to disable it because we no longer need it. Instead, we're going to have the slideshow. I have also added some notes, we'll get back to it later. So first, I'm going to explain a little bit this markup, so we're going to go over each section. Indicators are used to indicate on what slide you are, but for this template I've chosen to disable them because we're not going to need them. I've made a previous demonstration of the Carousel plugin, so feel free to go back to the section 4 to learn more in details about the Carousel.js plugin. You can also check out the live demonstration on the Bootstrap site, under the same section, Carousel.js. Moving along, we're going to continue with a description of the markup. So here we have the section for the slides. Each image element is wrapped in a div with a class of item. And for this demo, we already have 3 pictures ready that we're going to use for our demonstration. And I've also provided a collection of images that are available inside the images folder. All these pictures are under the Creative Commons license, and I found them on a website that you're going to see at the bottom, and they are free to use for any of your projects. Moving along, so this time we're going to see the controls, the sections for the controls that I've chosen also to disable. So those ones are used to move the slides from one to another, and we're not going to need them in our templates. And here is a live demonstration also on the Bootstrap site, so you see that whenever we click on the chevron, the one on the right, we move to the next slide. And for our demonstration template, I'd rather have a slideshow that runs automatically without using the chevrons. So that's a lot of explanation. So now the last thing we could do is now check out the template. So here it is after reloading. So now we can see our slideshow on the top of the content instead of the previous image. Here we go, so it looks like this is working properly. So every 5 seconds we have a new image which is sliding from one to another. Here we have nice tulips. Excellent. So now that we've incorporated already this plugin, we'd like to do some styling. So for that, we're going to go back to the beginning of our slideshow, and we're actually going to use the same class that we used for the image initially. So this one is pull right. You can also use the comments that I've added inside the markup. So here you have a note about the quick float. So I'm going to add this class pull right to this div with the class of slideshow already. And back to our template, we're going to reload. Here we go, so now we have our slideshow sitting next to the content and also the contact us buttons. Working good. And this is sliding to the next image properly. Perfect. A few more changes we can do, and for that what we're aiming for is to have the nice same oval shape that we had on the initial image. So for that we're going to use the class of image circle. And at the same time, we're going to grab as well the image.responsive class, which is going to make all the images responsive. So you're going to go ahead and add those two classes on each image element inside the wrapper for the slides. And once you're done, you can go back to your template, and after reloading, here it is. So now you have a nice oval shape for your slideshow. The carousel is working properly, and we can see that we still have the square shape whenever it slides through. So you can certainly change that. We can do that by having the slideshow running without the slide effect. So we're going to see that on the first div, you have two classes for the slideshow, class carousel and slide. I put a note on the top explaining what you can do in order to remove the sliding effect. So basically what you need to do is just to remove this slide. So we're going to save again, then reload. And let's see what happens next. Here we go, so now we can see that the images are transitioning from one to another without sliding from one to another. There are more options that comes with the JavaScript plugin carousel.js, but for that we're going to need to check out the script, which is available before the body tags, where we're going to find all the scripts for all the plugins that we're going to demonstrate during this section. Let's have a look at the JavaScript files first. To allow the JavaScript to work, we need those scripts to be loading first. So those ones include the jQuery, which is a content delivery network, CDN, meaning that this file is actually stored on the clouds by Google. So we need this one absolutely to come first. Next, we have the bootstrap.js file, and this is the minified version. And there is another one that we absolutely need, and this one is docs.js, and this is also a minified version. So to call our functions carousel.js, we're using the class carousel, which is this one, which is attached to this div. Here we can see the class carousel. And here, highlighted, you have the function carousel, which includes an object option, which is the interval, which controls the amount of time that an image is taking to change to another one. So we can have a little bit of control on how a carousel is working. And for that, we're going to check out the documentation for Bootstrap to see the different options that we have. First, we have the interval, which we just mentioned, and that can be used to indicate the amount of time that an image will take to change to the next one. The default time is 5 milliseconds, which comes down to 5 seconds. Without indicating an interval, the amount of time that an image will take to change will always be 5 seconds by default. We can also reduce the interval by adding a smaller value like 1000 milliseconds, which comes down to 1 second. Then you'll see that we'll have a very rapid transition. Here it is, pretty quick, although that's probably not the best approach for a good user experience. So we're going to change that back to 6 seconds. And first also I'd like to show you that you can also stop the automatic operation function of the slideshow by writing false. So you'll see that after reloading the page, the slideshow is not going to run at all. Let's look at some other options we have available as part of this plugin. So we can see that we can also choose to pause the slideshow whenever we hover over the slideshow with the cursor. And the way this works is that inside our script, JavaScript, we're going to add another option object, which is going to be pause. So first we're going to put that back to 6 seconds after a comma, and then we're going to write pause, and we're going to write hover. Then you'll see that the slideshow will continue to run normally, except when you hover over by using your cursor. So let's see that in action. I now have my cursor placed on this image, on the slideshow. And it's never gonna change until I mouse out. So here we go. So now it's back to running normally. So good work so far, so that looks pretty nice. The last thing I'd like to cover is about visibility and responsive utilities. And I put some notes in order to remind that you can use responsive utilities classes in order to hide some elements on smaller devices. And we're going to use the same classes that we had used initially for the image we had before on this template, and we're going to write hidden XS for extra small and hidden SM for small. And what's going to happen is that when we reduce the size of the screen until it reaches the breaking point of the smaller devices, this slideshow will magically disappear from the screen. There is one last thing I'd like to do in order to add a little bit of polish, and this is the caption that I'd like to add to our carousel. And this can be easily achieved by using a div with a class of carousel caption that we're going to add inside each slide. And these slides will be a div with a class of items. So right under the image element, we're going to go ahead and paste this piece of code, to which we're going to add some random title. And also some text inside the p tag to create a paragraph. And you're going to go ahead and do the same for the other slides for each div with a class of item by just simply copying and pasting. We can then see the result in the browser, and here it is. So for each slide we have a nice caption and some text. So this is really up to you, to your liking.